There's definitely this understanding, and we've discussed this, that empowerment is about in the community level. There has to be community ownership. There has to be community engagement, not because that is a policy movement, because that's where the value is. That is the most effective way of influencing and managing and responding and guiding and preparing, is given the capabilities already on the ground. On the other hand, we seem to have this schizophrenic idea of what a city is, or what urban resilience is, or what urban governance is. On the one side, if you said to people right now, okay, urban, city, a city in 2025, they'll think of Geneva or New York or Singapore or Tokyo or Toronto. If they know about it, they might talk about Neom or Eco-Atlantic in Nigeria, these hyper-modern things. They don't think about the slum experience, or they don't think about, anybody who's tried to get home in their car at 4:30 or 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon anywhere in the world. Those cities don't work. I mean, they're not good anymore. They've become gigantic. They've outgrown their capabilities. And as you discussed, Xavier, traditionally, people have moved from rural to urban. And the reason you went to the city was to make your fortune. Every culture has its story of the kid from the farm who goes to the city and becomes Lord Mayor or makes their fortune. City was center of innovation. It was a center of experimentation. It was at the forefront of the next generation. But now, and I think maybe for the first time, though, maybe not, I'm sure the Victorians would probably think the same, we see cities as failing, as disintegrating. Their fundamental underlying infrastructure is too old. It is underinvested. It is undermaintained. Sheela, I'm going to learn from you once more, because I'm like you. I speak a lot, and I like rhetoric, and I usually say there's 3 things you need to remember. But I've stopped saying that because I can never remember what the third thing is by the time I genuinely can't remember what it is. So I've stopped saying that now. But there are certainly a number of things that we definitely need to think about. So can I please, just for the last few minutes, let's have a roundtable discussion. But I'm going to ask you, what do we do as a global community? And I think we know what the answers are. How do we have those 3 things, the 3 things that we discuss in the ISRM? We want influence, we want impact, we want legacy. We want to change the dial. And to do that, you need structure and methodology. So what I want to talk now is basically the structure and methodology within our own urban environments. What do we do tomorrow? When we get up tomorrow morning, when we get up next Monday morning, what do we do? Toby, Sheela, let's come to you. Sheela, please, come on in.
Okay, so, I see, COVID has made me realize that the world, as we see it, like this global, we say globalization. I think the new globalization is the millions of local arrangements produce the new global. So if you have a clarity of what the solution locally is, and you produce that with a generosity to say that whatever works for me is available to you, and you look at it, and it sounds, when I talk about this to lots of people, they say, oh, but that will take forever. Well, development has taken forever, and all the money we've spent on it hasn't produced much for the poor. So I'll just give you a very interesting example. After working so many years, I've gone back to working with the poorest people who are barely able to make a home for themselves. And what do we find? The shattering statistic in Asia that 92% of all people who live informally and illegally and invisibly, those are the 3 words, design, construct, and finance their own homes. The state, the city, the global institutions are doing nothing to assist them, nor is the intellectual, research, educational community. And what we're doing is we're saying, can a bunch of crazy people like me work with 100 laboratories in different climatic zones in the poorest neighborhoods in the world and produce powerful local resilience mechanisms that those very poor people can afford because of the real belief, which is what I'm trying to say to you, that development never trickles down.
Sheela, I want to make sure we can go around the table.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, I spent 2.5 years in Nigeria, and Nigeria has some of the richest people on the planet.
Like India.
Absolutely like India. But the thing about it is I think there's 213 million people, 210 million people in Nigeria. 60-70% live on less than $1 a day. So the idea that there's any spare capacity within that economy is just not there. Okay, let's come to that. Toby, let's come to you. So both riffing off what we've heard from a global scale, but also in a major urban centre like London. And as I think we all know, I mean, London is only ever 5 minutes away from total collapse, isn't it? I mean, it really is on the edge of, we talk about robustness and we talk about resilience, but actually fragile and brittle is much, much more likely to do it. And what we're trying to do is retrofit something which is over basically a 19th century city, aren't we? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Your thoughts on that, please, sir?
I think the first thing to say, and this has come across from all of the discussion, is there is no one-size-fits-all model.
Yes.
What might work in London may not work in Nairobi. It may not work in Kiev, and so it goes on. The point is that the principles, however, are common. And the principle is that what you're trying to do is to build something which is cohesive and works together. You may be starting from a low base, a high base, an antiquated base, one which is falling apart, but you're trying to move in that direction. So that requires all the efforts about trying to build social cohesion. I'm not pretending that's easy. I'm not pretending that the context will be different, whether it's in London or Delhi or wherever it might be. But that's one of your objectives. Your objective is to try and build some sustainability in terms of your environment, because you know that if you just leave that, it will decline and it will disappear. So I think all I am saying is that when you're trying to run your city or your urban area or whatever it may be, these are the factors that you've got to bear in mind and try and hold them together and try and bring about balance. You won't have the resources to do all the things you'd like to do. So when you allocate your resources, do so in a way which is equitable between your different communities, which is fair in terms of balancing the needs for growth against your environmental sustainability. And that's got to be the approach that you take. The other thing is, cities are not a unified thing. David talks about London. Well, London is made up of 32 separate boroughs. Each of those boroughs has a whole myriad of communities. When I was at the most local level as a local councillor, I represented 5,500 electors. If you asked me how many distinct communities there were in there, I'd have said 4 or 5. And then there were lots of people just spread about, not part of any community. That will be true at every level in every city. So when you're trying to do this, this is incredibly complicated. You are trying to make sure that every community has a stake in what you're trying to build. Nobody's pretending it's easy, but you've got to have that vision, that direction of travel in your mind. Otherwise, you're not going to progress. You'll end up having something which is unbalanced and will fall apart really very rapidly.
Thanks. So, and of course, in your role as chair of the National Preparedness Commission, you are bringing together a community of people who are looking at that. Just your points on resilient society. Of course, our friends James Arbuthnot wrote the report in the House of Lords, Preparing for Extreme Risk, Building a Resilient Society. One of the points that he made was society has to be healthy to be resilient. If your society is fundamentally unhealthy because of polarization, because of alienation, then you can't build a resilient. It's like trying to build a house on timber which is rotten. So I think that's another issue that we need to come to. Jaroslav, we'll come to you, and then we'll come to Xavier. So again, these are all issues which is interesting because every issue is unique to the environment that each of you operate in. and yet they're also universal. You can take all of them and you can create them as universal issues that we're all facing in our own context, as Toby said. So Jaroslav, what lessons do you think, well, first of all, what have you taken from the discussion here today? And what lessons do you think Ukraine can give to the world about some of the challenges we're facing?
Fundamental issue is that no matter what our problems are, our differences, diversity, green transition, one thing that probably everybody would agree upon, in order to think about urban development, fighting poverty, utility services, everything, there must be peace. When rockets, missiles, drones attack your cities, bomb your cities, and it's chaotic, unpredictable. Every day we can have 3-5 alerts. Development is not possible. People are frozen in this atmosphere of uncertainty. And so it's survival. It's the concentration of all efforts. Hence, I think that the best what the world can do to deliver peace to Ukraine is to understand that our local, our close to heart agendas do not contradict the bigger idea of peace in the world. And that means that all our countries should say that in order to ensure good urban development, fight poverty, ensure solution of different social problems, there must be peace in the world, because having Third World War in the 21st century because of Nazi totalitarian regimes, it's outrageous. And Ukrainians who fight with the Russian aggressor, who face deficit of weapons because Western communities are reluctant to provide us with enough ammunition to fight, essentially block the development, and other issues for Ukrainians who are under bombs are secondary, are not that important, because it's a survival issue and a moral choice. That's one thing. Secondly, when we think about the post-victory reconstruction, we would definitely rely on the experience of success stories, success communities in the world. And I think in this case, this kind of decentralized manner of moving from decentralized pattern to decentralized hundreds, thousands of cities would be a great idea. And finally, let me remind you of one very interesting historical example. In the Middle Ages, we had this Magdeburg rights, when cities had their charters, and then it was like a franchise of how to govern an urban territory, urban unit. I think that it would be great to come up with the idea of a modern Magdeburg rights charter for Ukrainian cities. So that, for example, if Kharkiv or Lviv or Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, local communities want to get the experience of how to better arrange their lives, they could say, go to the owner of this kind of charter, urban charter rights, and say, this is it. This is how you can share from the best of our experience. And that would definitely be the kind of spillover effect of the joint theoretical and scholarly research we can do together.
Thank you, Jaroslav. I think, it's not just, of course, limited to Ukraine, and part of what the ISRM is about. It is to create, it says in our mission statement, a community of academics, policymakers, and practitioners who can come together, who can come together and can have impact, influence, impact, and legacy, which is what we're trying to do, and this is what it's very much about. And we will be carrying on, and that is part of what this program is about. It is about thought leadership and action leadership. It is about creating policies that are both realistic and realizable in the real world. Xavier, if there's one thing I can say about you, my friend, you live in the real world. You get up every morning, and basically the fundamental question you have to ask is, how do we help 160 million people give their kids breakfast a day safely and with clean water and with sanitation? Your thoughts from the conversation today, sir, and we'll give you almost the final thoughts, to move us into the following parts of this conference.
Yeah, if you allow me probably to highlight probably one of the key features of what we are capable to do is that we are extremely local organization, and that helps a lot. And local actors are our national societies, but when we said the national societies, we talk about geographies in 188,000 geographies, right? Not only countries. And I think that's an important element that helps us. We contribute, but there is a lot of local actors that are doing a tremendous good job as in the same manner. But the combination of local actors, I think, is a critical component to consider. I would like to highlight, just to answer one of the questions, it was saying how to prepare for urban big disasters as the case of Ukraine. And I would probably put it in a very quick matter is build clusters of coordination, of sectoral coordination that integrates governments, private sector, humanitarian and development organizations. And don't do it in isolation. We need to have the different actors together, and the role of private sector is fundamental for that. Then technology plays a tremendous role for standard setting and ensuring the quality of the response. And all these sectors need to be interconnected. That will be my first message. On the second point, I was reading in the chat about the challenges to operate in Ukraine. And I think we will probably need to have a separate discussion on war in cities and what are the implications of war in cities and war and cities resilience in situations of war. And I would like to raise this issue because the key element of resilience to me is individual resilience, family resilience, institutional resilience, and community resilience, wherever the conditions allow. Because if we are only centered in the conflict, we are leaving a huge majority of the population on the need to build their own resilience. And the final point, again, it has been mentioned around the war and the challenges that Red Cross and other organizations are facing. And to me, look, there are three elements that guarantees that we are capable to operate. One is humanitarian access. The second, it has to do with the humanitarian space to operate. And the third one is the sustainability of humanitarian action. When we look the case of Ukraine, since has been mentioned, Ukraine, the IFRC has supporting 14 million Ukraine people. Out of those, 6.5 million outside of Ukraine. And that means that 5,000 local offices of the Red Cross have been delivering humanitarian services all the time and continues delivering humanitarian services. While the others are internal displaced population, where engagement with the local authorities, with the government authorities for cash programming, delivery of services have contributed to alleviate the huge pressure and stress that the communities are having and individuals are having in Ukraine. And I'm saying this because it's critically important to bear in mind that any situation of risk and shocks over communities do have a significant stress in the communities. And if we can give just a small percentage of help to transform those challenges, stress into the individuals, if we can save it in one way or another, we can help communities to stand up and ensure that their institutions as well are capable to continue delivering services. So I will stop there because I think it's important to connect what has been put in the chat and what has been discussed here as well.
Xavier, my thanks to you. My thanks to all of our panelists. I think we're all trying to live to that old adage of think globally, act locally. And I think we're all trying to find solutions that are not radical, but are incremental and progressive, but have radical impact on people's lives. And I think that we're all facing that. Of course, when we talk about global urban resilience in the 21st century, there's actually two parts of that. First is how do we create resilient urban environments that we can live in safely and securely and effectively. And then, of course, you have the post-conflict or the post-event or the post-triggering. How do you respond and react, whether it might be a natural disaster or it might be a technological collapse, infrastructural collapse, it might be flooding, it might be COVID, it might be a war or some other situation. How do we then respond within that environment, which is already itself overstressed and under pressure? And maybe we can't do very much, but hopefully everybody listening today will hopefully take away something from this. And maybe, as I did here listening to Sheela, just feel that we can go out and maybe we can make a difference. I mean, the idea that we can make a difference. My thanks, as always, to Xavier Castellanos, to Jaroslav Romanchuk, to Sheela Patel, to Toby Harris. Thank you for your time in incredibly busy lives. We will be following up. We'll be sharing this. We'll be sharing this presentation. We will be putting out a version of this edited version at the end of the final session. If anybody wants to contribute to any of the people here, please do so locally, nationally, globally. If you want to be part of the ISRM, we're welcome to have you. I'd like to remind you, we have another session at 4:00 this afternoon, which is Cities on Fire, Cities Underwater, and how cities respond to those highly, highly challenging events which we're seeing on a daily basis. But for today, thank you. Can I please ask our global audience to show their thanks to the people we've heard today? And hopefully we'll see you at 4:00. But to everybody here, first of all, thank you for today. And I look forward to seeing what we as a community continue to do together collaboratively into the future. But for today, thank you very much.